Okay, cool. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, it's coming up. Yeah, it's on.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I haven't been around for quite some time in Nigeria, obviously with the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions, and obviously a lot has happened in the last year, and it's great to be part of your team in Nigeria, and obviously the audience that's part of this forum. I see some familiar names that I've met over the many years in my time in Nigeria. So thank you for your invitation. And please stop me if you can't hear me because of obviously the communication issues that sometimes happen. In terms of what has been discussed to date, I have a very short time allocated to me, so I'm not going to do it great justice, unfortunately, but I'll try my best to really cover as much as I can. But I thought, based on the recent change from the MAP to the mass metering, I would like to talk about a topic that I was raised when I was invited to the initial or the inaugural launch of the MAP program in March 2018. And Mr. Shattermeyer would recall that, and obviously a lot of you that's on this call would remember that day in terms of the presentations. But I noticed that in all the presentations now today, there's not much talk about ATC&C, and to be honest, I still have a passion around this ATC&C loss because I strongly believe that is one of the major causes of your current crises in Nigeria, and I know that there's a metering gap that's been needed to be concluded. That was one of the main reasons for the MAP program. Obviously, it's one of the main reasons now for the NMP. But I still believe that a lot of focus is not really taken shape in terms of the ATC&C loss. I'm just going to remind some of the audience about my presentation I did in 2018. And this particular slide talks about, what was the key reasons for the formation of discos in 2013, November 2013 to be exact, and what was the KPI particularly that was needed for this formation of the 11 discos that you have today. And one of the major key reasons is aggregate technical, commercial, and collection losses. And this is something that I think is in terms of NERC, in terms of all the various stakeholders within the government, it's not talked enough about how do collectively the stakeholders engage on this ATC&C loss. Because I believe if you bring this ATC&C loss down dramatically, it will have a major effect in terms of your collection, your billing, that we've heard from previous speakers now, and obviously the efficiency of the billing. Because at the end of the day, and I'm just scrolling through some of the slides. I don't want to talk too much about these slides, but these are important slides that I picked up just by surfing the net and looking at these slides. I mean, this particular slide stands out because everything in red is not what you want. Everything in red should be, the black should be bigger than the red in terms of the graphs that you see. So, it's a key issue that plays a part. This is a recent document that I found, which was an appraisal of ATC&C losses. I think it was in this document came out in December 2020. So it's recently up to date. And I didn't put the whole document in, there's obviously many pages, but in terms of a particular set of information, I just highlighted that in the table below, and you can see that energy delivered and energy billed across the board is only 87%. Now that should be 100%. So, you know, these are questions that I challenge all of you in this industry, is why aren't we trying to achieve 100% here? In terms of billing, why aren't we talking about 100% billing rather than 89% billing? And these are critical questions that I'm posing. There are many aspects to fixing the problem in Nigeria. So I'm not here advocating that I can come here with a magic wand and fix it, but I'm challenging the thought process that one has. Now, this is a slide that I presented again, which was interesting because in quarter 1 2018, the total disco debt at the time was 112 billion naira. You know, that's a massive figure if one looks at it. And if you look at the ATC&C targets when the discos were formed, and what was really interesting is that the target, let's say for ECHO, was 20.56%, but the actual at that time was 26%, and that was the best disco out of the lot. Kaduna, which was the worst disco, had a target of 11.23% AT&C loss that they had to achieve, but their actual at the time was 71%. Now, these are, to me, critical questions that should be posed in this type of forum, because it's this ATC&C loss, I believe, that if we can collectively reduce that to single figures, a lot of your issues would be resolved. Your finance issues, your metering issues in terms of NEMSA and all those type of aspects, your cash flow and your billing and revenue and all of that stuff gets fixed. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I just want to go into some of the MAP regulation challenges at the time. Again, I'm going back in time. Of course, things have changed since then, but I think it's important for this type of forum just to reflect back on some key points that I raised at the time. And I still believe a lot of those are pertinent in today's times. So one of them was estimated billing. I mean, I know that estimated billing was one of the main reasons that formulates this metering gap that the previous speaker, the guest speaker, Mr. Zakaria mentioned about 4 or 5 million meters that need to be rolled out in a very short space of time to fix this estimated billing. But, you know, my problem that I have, and that's why this is number one on my list, is the question, is fixing the metering gap going to fix the problem that you have in Nigeria as it stands right now? And that's a fundamental question. And the reason I ask that question, yes, of course, a meter would provide accurate measurement of electricity usage. I'm with that, and I agree with you that I'm not stopping the argument about rolling out meters to fix the metering gap. But the problem is that if you are not, as a collective, fixing the fundamental problems about billing, about accuracy of billing. I mean, there was talk about, I think NEMSA was talking about, one of the slides was talking about, you know, it's all very well putting a smart meter in, but if the smart meter is not properly calibrated, you know, which is worse, estimated billing or a meter that's not properly calibrated? So these are questions, and that brings me to the point. If we are not, again, focusing on fixing ATC&C losses by introducing more meters into the field, and the only way you can fix ATC&C losses is that you've got to have a proper back-end system that the data from these meters feeds in. where you can bill accurately, and we can talk about billing a little bit later, and payment and collection, for example. But it's also about data and what does the data give at Disco? What does the data give an MAP or a mass metering provider? What does data give TCN? Because with load data, TCN can start planning what they need to what they need to do in terms of overhead lines and infrastructure like the substations and so forth. But without that data, they are going in blind at the moment, and this is critical for NERC, to start measuring what would be the correct tariff. I mean, Mr. Shatama already mentioned that the tariffs are wrong, and I agree with him. But how does NERC get around presenting the right tariff that's going to, make the discos have some form of profitability so that they can invest in infrastructure, but also at the same time is that NBET, which pays all the various generation and transmission and so forth, gets the right income so that all that infrastructure can also be invested into. So to me, estimated billing is a big focus here that needs to be addressed in terms of what is the strategy around estimated billing and fixing that. Data regulation. How is data regulation affecting all the discos? Are the discos submitting every single bit of data that they collect, or are the discos only selectively submitting the data that they feel needs to be submitted? These are questions, again. I know there's going to be some arguments around that point, but it's a point. Because think about it, if NERC from a national perspective collects all the relevant technical data, forget about collection data and billing data and customer data, but specifically load data that the meter provides. And what can they do then in terms of tariff management, as an example? Furthermore, economy of scale. We've got 11 discos, plus you've got TCN as well, so make it 12 entities. Each one of these entities in their own right are empowered to go and buy metering systems and so forth, and try and get the best efficiency out of their systems so they can reduce ATC&C losses, as an example. But are they empowered by doing so? And that's the question I'm posing here. Think about it. A disco has a very ring-fenced environment that they have to deal with in terms of number of meter points and so forth. Is economy of scale allowing them to buy the right system at the right price so that they can actually affect what is actually really wanted in the industry today? And this points to Mr. Zakari's opening statement, where he was talking about the Presidential Power Initiative, the PPI. And this is precisely where Siemens comes in, is obviously through our engagement with the federal government of Nigeria, and don't forget the government of Germany, who is standing by the federal government of Nigeria in this particular program. And I posed many years ago, some of you will know about this, is a central system. Why? Because the central system is going to provide economy of scale at the end of the day. And that's one of the key factors that's going to make it affordable for the discos to roll out new meters, collect their revenue, and actually pay bills at the end of the day, whether it's an NBET bill or their own employee bill. So economy of scale, to me, is a fundamental question as well. And the MAP autonomy at the time, what is the strategy of government, MP in this instance, or the MMP, the go-ahead to just go and procure meters, without a strategy of what actually meter are you going to procure, what's obviously working with NEMSA, what is the standard of that meter, what does it have to comply to? And I noticed in the NEMSA presentation, there's nothing mentioned there about DLS and COSM, which is the critical means of bringing data, the transport mechanism of bringing data from a meter into a central system. And that needs to be really ratified very quickly so that the meters that are procured comply to a national Nigerian standard that forces a meter vendor to 100% comply and ultimately make a plug-and-play environment in the industry. So again, map of autonomy, that's one of the reasons why I brought that in. And then the other point is are we going to roll out prepayment meters, STS prepayment meters, or are we going to roll out a combination of STS prepayment and smart meters? Because don't forget, smart meters, and this is where we come in at Siemens, we can provide a real robust prepayment system as well. So we can have both. We can have one or the other, or we have both. I mean, these are strategies that need to be defined from a national perspective. So coming into recommendations I gave to NERC at the time is, don't rush. Engage and talk. Get a strategy in place, because right now, and that was in 2018, they were rushing into this MAP program with really no, in my mind, and I'll be honest with you, no high-level strategic national perspective in terms of how are we going to get the data from these meters that are going to be procured from MAPs, for example. National meter standards, that's been discussed here with the NEMSA, and obviously I mentioned something about that. Testing and so forth, that's important. Meter procurement from an economy of scale. The MAP program at the time in 2018 was very ring-fenced to a very small amount of meters that they were allowed to procure. Now, do they have the backing of economy of scale to go and negotiate a really good price from the vendor, from the meter vendor? Question mark. Again, a question that needs to be asked. Also, there was a question around meter ownership. Who actually owns the meter at the end of the day if the customer is paying for the meter? Does the customer own it, or does the DISCO or the MAP own that meter? Question mark. So these are questions. I'm just regurgitating a lot of the stuff that are queried and challenged the industry at the time. What is the framework in terms of a possible centralized AMI system? And this is where the PPI, the Presidential Partnership, came in. Once you have a centralized system, you can start looking at things like security of revenue for individual DISCOs by ring fencing that DISCO in the central system and making sure that they get paid, because that is very important for DISCO to make sure to understand that they're going to be paid 100% of what they due. But then NBET also is going to raise his hand and say, I also need to get paid exactly what's due to me. ATC loss reduction, massive discussion point that I believe needs to really happen in terms of the MAP or the NMP program, because it's by looking at how we collectively can reduce that loss and things like revenue protection. In other words, picking up those who are thieving electricity by either damaging the meter or bypassing the meter and so forth. That's where a centralized system can really play its part. And then the DISCO and the MAP or the NMP vendor can actually then target that particular user or organization, whoever is now thieving electricity, and deal with it. And so all of these are really interesting points. I'm not going to work too much on them. And also, where's the focus? Is it residential? Because I believe the metering gap is focused very much on residential. But I strongly believe that the MDs and the MDAs need to be focused on first, because those are the important big users of electricity. And by making sure from a national perspective that those are in place and that we have a really good, robust system that measures the data that comes through, and obviously ensures that the payment of the usage of electricity, and I'm going to point fingers at the MDAs, because I know that, and I'm sure I'm going to have 11 hands raised up agreeing with me that the NDAs in Nigeria don't pay their bill. So that adds to the ATC&C loss that we're all experiencing in today's term. How do we fix the payment etiquette of NDAs, particularly to do pay their bill, so that to ensure that the DISCO is actually fairly compensated for the work that they do and the infrastructure that they put in, let alone the TCNs of the world. You know, so this slide really just emphasizes where does a DISCO focus. And I strongly believe the MDs and the MDAs first. Why? Because they generate pretty much most of the revenue. The residential, yes, have most of the meter points, but they don't bring in the type of revenue that the MDs and MDAs. So that's always something that I discuss with our customers, is to really focus on that, get that 100%. If you get MDs and MDA revenue and collection 100%, I'm not talking about 99 or 99.5%, I'm talking about 100%. You'll find that the focus thereafter in terms of residential is made much more easier because of the revenue that's coming in, the cash flow that comes in, particularly if you put them all onto a prepayment system. So what are the general challenges DISCOs have? So due to ATC&C losses, revenue is dramatically affected. And this is very apparent, you know. I mean, I remember a presentation in 2019. It was quite a high-ranking profile from the Ministry of Power, where they presented a startling fact, which really started making sense, that NBET in 2019 was only experiencing or only receiving 28% of the revenue due to them by the DISCOs. And that's a startling effect that it was a startling stat that really affected my thinking. And a lot of that has to do with ATC&C losses, I can be honest with you. Cash flow, a lot of your MDs and MDAs do post payment instead of prepayment. Now, how does that affect cash flow, and how does it help affect the DISCOs, and how does that ultimately affect NBET and the TCN and then the GENCOs? Cash flow is king, and put everyone on prepayment. Doesn't matter who they are, whether it's a residential MD or MDA, put them on prepayment. Suddenly your cash flow changes dramatically. NBET's cash flow can change as well accordingly. Everyone's cash flow can change. And I think that's very important. Billing. What systems are the DISCOs putting in place, and what regulations around that ensures that they put the right billing systems in place, so that they're collecting the right system, the right revenue, and creating efficiencies in terms of collection losses and so forth, and billing correctly and making sure you bill 100%. And this is a challenge because of economy of scale, the DISCOs are have a major impact in terms of cost of these systems. So they're going by something that makes a financial sense or business sense. But then are they getting the right efficiencies out of these systems, and are they working? And that's maybe a question. And so again, it's a challenge that I put together. And then lastly, in terms of this, is tariff management. And we've heard from Mr. Chinema around tariff management. I don't believe NERC is in a position to really understand what is the right tariff to regulate, because of the fact that they lack data. And that's something I strongly believe we need to tackle as a collective and as an industry, and get that data properly in place so that we can all engage on the tariff and the tariff costs and so forth, so that ultimately everyone gets some form of some little bit of profit to help them invest into things like infrastructure. So the next point that I want to quickly go through is the Siemens PPI Central MDMS.
Mr. Martin, Mr. Martin, you may kindly just do an overview and round up so that you can take questions in the comment section. Okay. We'll be going to the comment section now.
I'll do that. I'll do that very quickly. Thank you. So, maybe I'm not even going to go through the slides. I'm going to talk on this particular slide. So the PPI Central MDMS has been proposed in 2019 formally to the government and the stakeholders at the time, and was ultimately very warmly received based on direct engagements with all the discos and all the stakeholders. So we really did a proper engagement and sought the issues that were there, and obviously any problems that the various stakeholders had in terms of this thinking. We're still waiting for that to be finalized and promulgated. Unfortunately, as 2019, we're now 2021. So a lot of water's flown under the bridge and nothing's really happened. So it's unfortunate, but that's the situation, and we are engaging, and hopefully we can steer the ship down the right path. And I know, and we've engaged with the likes of CBN in terms of their program to make a cashless environment. We've engaged with NERC in terms of the national system and the national regulations and so forth. We've engaged with the Ministry of Power and the Ministry of Finance. We've engaged with all of those stakeholders, particularly also with Ministry of Power and TCN and the individual discos. So I implore you, we have something that's there that can really, really help steer the ship nicely, help reduce ATC&C losses, and make sure that we deliver on that. And I'd like to end off the presentation on that note.